I first met the Hollywood legend Ava Gardner, I truly couldn't believe it, you know. It's one of those moments, isn't it, where I'm sure if anybody was in the same position, you would think, wow, there she is. But at that particular time, cast your mind back, I was very young, right? And I'm moonlighting, as they say, between jobs in the theatrical world as a waiter in a very nice hotel, which I now know to be literally round the corner from her London home. But at that time, you know, you're just taking any job that you can get. I think it was called the Lounge Hotel or Lounge Thistle or something like that. And it had this sort of bar, you know, that was outside, inside, but then tables and sort of chairs outside. And every single day, this lady would turn up with dark glasses on, a tracksuit and her little dog, and would sit outside and have a cup of coffee, you know, and just chat. And it was sort of menial sort of chat, really. How are you? Busy, all that sort of stuff. But she was always very pleasant. And I was always fascinated because I just loved her accent, the way she asked for things, stuff like that. Always incredibly polite, but had a very salty laugh. Never did I realise when I was speaking to her that this was Ava Gardner. That came a little bit later, because as we got to chat and I told her about my life and my showbiz aspirations, what I'd done, all that sort of stuff, she began to open up. And of course, when you look back at those particular notes and when you look back at those particular recordings, of which I was lucky enough also to make, well, it's just fascinating, isn't it? You know, because you think, I never realised that. And Ava Gardner shared with me exactly how she managed to get Frank Sinatra all the way back to the top of the tree in Hollywood. But actually, it wasn't just Ava. As she pointed out, it was an association with none other than a senior member of the British monarchy. As ever, let me explain. What I loved about Ava Gardner was that she was a direct lady, you know what I'm saying? Really said it as it truly was. And she was one of those sort of people at that point in her career, really didn't care what people thought, told the truth. You know, she was literally working on her autobiography. And at that point, I wasn't really into journalism, so it would have been very hard for me to take it up. But what a wonderful opportunity, because she did say, do you know anybody that will be interested in my story? Can you imagine? Would anybody be interested in the life story of Ava Gardner? And what was interesting about Ava, as she said, she would sort of come in on a daily basis and drop all these bombshells about people that she'd met, you know, everybody from presidents, you know, to literally her life in Spain with the bullfighters. She was very, very down to earth, to put it bluntly. But of course, everybody knew about her marriage to the one and only Frank Sinatra. And as she pointed out to me, really, it was her association with the British monarchy that truly kick-started Frank's career back into orbit. Because at this particular time, as she said, in 1951, Frank's career was simply going nowhere. He'd been the Bobby Soxer, he'd done incredibly well, made quite a lot of movies, but really, by the time he came over to London to stay with her, she pointed out that she was keeping him on her MGM salary. And she didn't mind, of course, he was the love of her life and all that sort of stuff, but she said it wasn't really going particularly well for Frank Sinatra. Until, of course, she met none other than His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip. And according to her, Philip was simply captivated by Ava Gardner. I told you, you see, she wasn't shy in coming forward. And what was lovely about this particular story, she basically said, you know, she'd been invited to a charitable event, and she said, absolutely, how about I get Frank to come along and sing a couple of numbers? Apparently, the Duke of Edinburgh said, Frank who? And then, of course, the penny dropped. And Frank Sinatra was booked to appear at a charity event in December 1951 for the National Playing Fields Association, a huge charity associated with the Duke of Edinburgh. But what followed was even better. Did incredibly well on that night, literally singing in front of the Duke of Edinburgh and, of course, other senior members of the British monarchy. But, of course, it was Ava Gardner that was the draw. When she came into the audience decked out in a fabulous gown and borrowed MGM diamonds, as she pointed out to me, all eyes were upon her. But she wanted to very much engineer a meeting between the Duke and Frank. They'd not met prior to the concert. So very cleverly, after the event at the Empress Club in London for the after-show party, she got her chance. MGM boss of publicity, Howard Strickland, was there also on hand, and he knew exactly what Ava was looking to achieve. And this is what you see, those particular snaps. Now they look rather innocent enough, don't they? There's Frank with his natural hair at this point, not exactly looking his best, a little bit downcast and wondering exactly what the future could have held. Of course, he still had another tour to come over here in the United Kingdom, and that necessarily wasn't also a huge success. But what this did was spark some level of interest back into Hollywood. You see, these pictures hit the front pages of the trades, as they called them back then, and more importantly, some of the front pages of the tabloids of the time. Ava and Frank's night out with the Duke was Confidential's leading headline. A little bit far-fetched even then. But what this really did, according to her, was get people looking to be interested in Frank Sinatra as a wonderful performer that we know and love today. A very clever, canny move. Ava Gardner was a very shrewd woman, let me tell you. But what was interesting also, she pointed out that basically the boss of Columbia Pictures, Harry Cohen, had asked her point blank, did she engineer it? And she said no. You know, they had an invitation by the royals to sing. Harry Cohen, as I say, the boss, the tough boss of Columbia Pictures, really admired the fact that Ava Gardner was sticking out for her man. And it was that association and that built-up friendship that then, in turn, led to Frank being considered and finally cast for his comeback film, which would land an Oscar, From Here to Eternity. All down, as she pointed out, to the fact that suddenly people were interested in Frank Sinatra again. Now, this may seem a little bit odd when you think about it, but cast your mind back to the late 1940s, early 50s. At this point, of course, think about it, the Duke of Edinburgh is the Playboy Prince. He's married, but he's gorgeous, lots of women like him. Ava Gardner's next to him, MGM are thrilled, there's publicity. And of course, this wonderful association that there she is standing with a man married to the Queen of England. And more importantly, she managed to get her man, Frank Sinatra, doing the same thing. This absolutely did nothing to harm their careers. And as she laughed about it many years later, and she met the Duke and the Queen on another couple of occasions, she often thanked him privately for what he'd done innocently. And more importantly, Frank Sinatra, she said, truly had no idea who'd engineered what behind the scenes. But as she also pointed out in a very frank and powerful way, isn't that all women know? Men have simply no idea. With that, she laughed, picked up her dog, and literally went round the corner to that wonderful flat. Ava Gardner, truly, what a woman. Neil Sean in the very heart of London.